Welcome back to week 5 of my HIFAWIP journal, where I tell you how I feel about what I played this last week. I've got a lot to say this week, and I actually have an entirely new segment that I think I'm going to jump right into immediately. So not many people know this about me, but I play this one game that I think is pretty cool.
It's called Fortnite. It's free.
It's pretty new, but I've actually been making a point of playing it with my dad because he likes it a lot, and so we've been playing it pretty much every week. So I'm going to tell you about it in a segment that I'm calling Fortnite Fun Times with Dad. That'll stick. Anyways, he and I had a bit of a longer session this week, and it once again started with Blitz Royale, which I enjoyed a lot more this week. I'm not sure what the theming was, but it had weapons that I enjoyed. We went 8-4 on wins versus losses, and I'm not upset about that at all. Plus, one of them was really close despite me being freshly rebooted, and so if I had more items, I probably could have clutched up, and that'd be one more win. After Blitz, we didn't actually end up playing Battle Royale like we typically do, but we played Reload instead because it had been a while. We only won one round out of the 5 that we played, but we did get second place twice. And the second round that we played was incredibly action-packed with some really funny and really cool plays that got made. I ended up team wiping a couple people with the charge shotgun. I've been using that and really enjoying it. There was a moment where I blindly jumped into a bush that very obviously had multiple people in it, and my dad clutched up after I got knocked. There's a team on like ultimate high ground above retail row that we had to push at one point, and my dad made the play of the game when he shockwaved both of them into the storm and won that engagement for us sort of by default. So that was definitely a fun game. There was another game where we lost pretty early on, and for some reason the spectator mode while we waited for the next match bugged, and so I had a very tranquil scene of a campfire that I had died next to while I waited for the next match. One of the reasons that we played Reload was because we haven't spent a ton of time on either of the newest maps since they've been added. There's one called Slurp Rush, which is Chapter 2 themed, and there's one called Squid Grounds, which is the new Squid Game collaboration map. To get it out of the way, I hate the new Slurp Rush map. Maybe it's because I hated Chapter 2, maybe it's because the grass is this awful green color, maybe it's the actual design of the map and the way that the gameplay flows. I just don't like it. It's not for me. I can appreciate the overabundance of the slurp that's on the map and the way that like keeps your health topped off at all times. But if I'm thinking about playing Reload and I click on the mode and see that this is the map that's currently rotated in, then I'm probably just closing the game. I don't really think it even highlights some of the best parts of the Chapter 2 map, which is what it's based off of, and so I just can't be bothered to play it. The Squid Grounds map, however, is a map that I have incredibly mixed feelings about. First of all, it's a collaboration in Reload, which on principle I kind of don't mess with. Battle Royale can get pretty insane in terms of collaborations or outlandish mechanics, but from the launch of Reload, it's always been about kind of like holding it down in terms of the classic gunplay and in terms of the classic POIs that are always on the map. And it came out in Chapter 5 Season 2, which was sort of like the start of Fortnite releasing a bunch of like crazy shit into the game that people didn't want to play over like a more classic version of Fortnite. So letting a collaboration into Reload is like very strange, although I understand like the benefit of it from a game design standpoint, because Reload is the mode that has respawns in it. And the Squid Game stuff that they put in benefits from having respawns because, you know, you lose at red light, green light, then you get back into the game. There's not really like, you don't have to wait to queue back into red light, green light, because that'd suck. I get that. But that is sort of like the entire content of the collaboration, which is just okay. There's the red light, green light, like I said. There's also like a couple of spots where there's like death run style things that you can do. There's part of these collabs that I think, oh, that's, you know, short and harmless and might as well go do the thing to guarantee getting better loot. But the more I think about it, the more I realize it kind of demolishes the pacing of the mode. Just to mansplain how battle royales work a little bit, the way that looting works in any battle royale, but especially in a mode like this, is that everyone gets the exact same chance to get good loot from the start, but that chance is slim. And so everyone pretty much starts with the same lower tier level loot, and you take your initial fights and you end up leaving your POI. But the more people that you interact with, either you die and you lose all your stuff, or you win and you get to go through all of their stuff. And so as you go on and as you interact with more people, the chances that you run into an item that is more powerful than the ones that you already have exponentially increases as you run into people and they've run into people before you, and you see all of the best loot from around the map congregating into one location as the storm closes. And you know, there's times when you get insanely lucky and land on really good stuff, but then you have to take that to the end of the zone, and someone else might be in the position to eliminate you and take it for themselves. That's the basis of the mechanical side of a battle royale. One of the things that the base battle royale in Fortnite specifically has done is implement different ways of sort of sidestepping that by doing like side quests or like mid-match objectives in BR, which is a way like the player base has accepted that they've changed up the formula, and I think is a good way to do things. But those side quests look like fighting bosses or going to specific locations that get marked for you or interacting with NPCs, and that is something that Reload up until this point has been specifically designed without mid-match objectives in mind. And I think it being such a fighting focused mode means that it shouldn't have these mid-match objectives. And so like, while these things they seem kind of harmless and it's like, yeah, might as well go do this fun thing, then it takes away from like the overall integrity of the mode in a way, I think. Which is like, it's a fucking Fortnite mode, who cares? But this is a community that pushes back against that kind of thing in the default mode. And so they were given this to not have to worry about that. And now they do have to worry about that, which I think is kind of lame. And I hope that they don't put in more min-match objectives shit like this again, because it really messes with the pacing of it. There's less people interacting with each other to consolidate loot like typically occurs now, because they're just going somewhere else to find it. And they're also like really good places to camp, which sucks for the way that the game is played. Despite all of this, I regret to inform you that the Squid Grounds map is probably objectively the best map in terms of its physical features. It has the most fun variants in terms of terrain, and the natural and locational cover is the most like varied and fun to play around, because the points of interest are the most varied and fun to play around. And in terms of like the trees and natural cover and stuff, they used props from chapter 4 and 5, which are of objectively higher quality than props that they've brought back for other Reload maps, which are from chapters 1 and 2. I also think that like the biome choices that they did they look the best out of the other Reload maps. Since every collaboration in Fortnite has a sort of shelf life, I really hope that someday this map gets all the Squid Game stuff removed from it and we just get to keep this map. But I do worry that someday the map will just be gone entirely because it contains Squid Game stuff. But despite the shortcomings of its pacing and everything, it's still my favorite map to play on that's in the current rotation. They've got those two maps that I mentioned, plus the original Venture map. And I am missing Oasis, but I'll live. There's other weird choices that they've made with Reload recently, but I think I've spent long enough bitching and moaning about it, so I'll come back to those another time. And I'm going to move on to Game 2. Last week for Game 2, I talked a bit about my favorite game of all time, Portal 2. And for the foreseeable future weeks, I am going to be talking about my favorite series of all time, which is not the Portal series, it's Metroid. I decided to start another marathon of the Metroid games, specifically the mainline games, starting with Metroid Zero Mission. Despite loving the series and the genre it pioneered, I've got to say I've actually been less than happy returning to it. Zero Mission is a remake of the first Metroid game from the NES, which was just called Metroid. And I think it's not only a great starting point for the series, but a great first Metroidvania in general, as it does a really good job of teaching those gameplay mechanics and the sort of overall mechanics of the series and the genre as a whole. But for someone that is overwhelmingly familiar with those mechanics already, I have been disappointed again and again with how that knowledge has not been rewarded at all. In other titles, there's things that you can do typically in terms of like type platforming or simply performing things based on your game knowledge that can net you some sort of benefit, typically in the form of like an early power-up or something like that. And these will lead to what's called a sequence break, where you can use that early power-up to attach yourself to a part of the game that you weren't meant to be able to get to yet. And these sequence breaks aren't entirely not present in Zero Mission, but have been less than rewarding for me. For instance, I've spent a significant amount of time doing what's called a Shine Spark puzzle, or several of them, which are these really fun paths that you can take that revolve around using the speed booster power up, and you like store your speed boost in a crouch, and then you can like shoot off in a certain direction and then carry that momentum into repeatedly doing that if you can land on the right spaces. And these sort of things are like somewhat precise, and so they don't expect you to be able to do them unless you're an experienced player, and so they give you good rewards for it. Like the first one that I did, I got the super missiles early. And before I got the super missiles, I had come across a couple of doors that I knew could only be opened with the super missiles. And so I went back and opened them, and I didn't really get anything for it other than a couple more super missiles, but I don't have anything to use them on. There's only really 3 bosses in the game, and I beat one of them already. It's going to be a minute before I fight the next one, and they're not all that difficult to begin with anyways, so I don't exactly need the most powerful items in the game to be able to defeat it. Like, it'll go faster, but I don't know how much I'm in it to play less of the game, if that makes sense. And every other enemy in the game is just kind of fodder, so what's the point? I also got stuck before and after getting the first like suit upgrade of the game, which kind of sucked. Just since it's designed as like baby's first Metroidvania, it gives you checkpoints to head to as you progress through the game. And if you don't beeline straight to those checkpoints, it feels like going off the beaten path is not just doing that to collect other things, which is like what a Metroidvania is about at times, but it trying to return to that path makes it incredibly confusing, and I had no idea what I was doing leading up to the rooms and exiting the rooms after getting this power-up that I needed. Admittedly, this is like a skill issue in part, and the other part is like I'm overdoing it because I am too confident with this series, but I don't remember having these problems the second or third time that I played this game, so I don't know what's going on. I'll probably just speed through the rest of it within the next week and then move on to the better titles, and I'll have better things to say about those because I've played them more. But as of now, I'm like halfway through, and the end is definitely near. Moving on to game 3, this is one that I've wanted to speak about at length for a while, but I've definitely mentioned it here and there, and that game is Apex Legends. I've spoken about playing it off and on for a few years and my problems with it, but I keep coming back for one main reason, and that's the gunplay. Before I really get into that though, there's a comically large elephant that is in the room anytime anyone talks about this video game, and so I'm going to do my best to address that now. Yes, Apex Legends killed Titanfall. I do not have any hope that this series will return anytime soon, and if it does, I do not expect the next Titanfall installment to live up to the gold standard that is Titanfall 2 in any way, shape, or form. However, these are entirely different games with entirely different feels and gameplay loops. Objectively, there is room for both of these titles within the gaming landscape and even within a single company's lineup itself. Even with the titles having weapons that are incredibly reminiscent of each other, even the same weapons to some extent. Apex having remnants of Titanfall's moving mechanics. they are incredibly different at their core. Titanfall is a game about high-octane, insane movement and fast time-to-kill gunplay. And Apex, whether it's a battle royale or not, is significantly more tactical of a game with its slower time to kill, less movement options, and the main feature of its gameplay, which I'm trying to get to, is its cast of weapons, none of which are hit scan, which leads to some incredibly skill expressive weapons. The core difference between these titles is movement versus gunplay. Both of them have elements of each other, but both of them have their niches carved out, and both of them deserve to be side by side, I think. Anyways, surprise, surprise, the weapon designs are the main reason that I'm in love with the shooter game again. Shocker. You'll get the same conversation again when I go back to playing Ultra Kill, which will probably happen whenever the next layer releases, but that's probably the third and final game that I nerd out over the specifics of the gun design. Anyways, like I said, all of the weapons in this game are projectile based. Not just this, but there is variance between each of these types of projectiles, varying in things like velocity, drop pattern, size, movement slowing on impact. And something I only recently discovered about the game is that some of the weapons even have a maximum headshot range. You can't headshot from long distances with things like the SMGs. These extreme variances and the designs of the weapons themselves lead to a pool of weapons where I'd argue in season 25 of the game, not a single one doesn't have a distinct place in the public game meta, depending on the type of player that chooses to run the weapon. And those creative designs are the lifeblood of the game, I think. Even though it's like a hero shooter, I think the guns are the most important part of this game. Currently, Apex has 29 weapons, not counting power weapons that are there for a limited time or weapons that are sourced from the kits of the different characters in the game. There are 5 assault rifles, 3 of which are automatic fire and 3 of which are burst fire, 5 SMGs with only 1 of them being burst fire, 3 pistols, 4 LMGs, 4 marksman or DMR style weapons, 3 snipers, a bow, and 4 different shotguns. Each of them have incredibly distinct features and details that carve out a spot that they belong in within the larger meta, and many of these features, like I've said, are incredibly creative, like the burst assault rifle that shoots projectiles that are made of energy, and that energy winds up the weapon as it leaves the muzzle, increasing the fire rate and, by nature, the DPS of the weapon as you continue shooting it. Or we could talk about the slowest firing LMG of the lot, which hits harder and is more consistent to use from range for this, but with the help of a thermite grenade can become the fast firing weapon that you need for a close range engagement instead of the unreliable secondary it was previously. How about the SMG that you can change the ammo type of if you end up running out of it in the middle of the match? Or the marksman rifle that fires 3 distinct projectiles, allowing for easier shots to be hit at range and more reliable shots to be hit up close. But if you aim down sight long enough, then there's a choke on the weapon that makes the projectiles closer together so you can hit harder shots from range. There's the bow that can be charged with a grenade so that the arrows explode on impact, a sniper that can benefit from increased damage and fire rate with an electric charge you can supply to it, an LMG that doesn't run out of bullets but instead overheats and can theoretically shoot forever if you have enough ammo. There's a marksman rifle that gains both damage and headshot multiplier if you hold a charge as you aim down sights with it and line up your shot better. A sniper with a projectile that gains both velocity and damage as it flies through the air. I haven't even mentioned the shotguns or pistols, and I could go on. Each of these weapons takes their own skill set to use properly, and none of them can be picked up and used flawlessly immediately by any player. It's probably the most skill expressive gunplay I've ever seen in multiplayer shooter game, as there's simply no just pick up and click on someone with any of the weapons, and with the set recoil patterns that they have, there's no RNG involved with that skill either, as unless you're going for a no-scope, every gun is going to be exactly the same every time. I played a lot of Apex this week with Gage, and gushing over its gun design is the reason that I'm talking about it so much. Plus, in one of these games with Gage, I had my first game where I did over 3,000 damage, which I was super proud of. So that's the footage that's been in the background this entire time. I was super proud of that achievement, and I'm going to continue loving this game despite all of its other many, many shortcomings, because I love the gun designs so much. That's really all I have for this week, so thanks for watching. Next weekend, I'm going to be house sitting again, so hopefully I'm going to figure out a way to make this work, and hopefully I'm not going to be deathly ill again when I go to record. This week, leave a comment about your favorite game or favorite game series. I feel like I'm throwing around the word favorite an awful lot in this series, so I'm interested to see what other people consider their favorites of all time in that way. I'll see you again next week. Welcome to HIFAWIP, my weekly journal where I tell you how I feel about what I did this week. I went outside this week a lot. I spent a lot of time with people that I really love to be around, and I feel like I wanted to speak about that in some capacity, but I don't think that it was right to just like mix it in with the other part of the video, especially a video where I was being so critical of games, because I don't want to be critical of these experiences. I just have enjoyed being alive this week is all. Despite the games that I played and did or didn't have a ton of fun with, the moral of the story this week is bake with your friends, watch the new Superman movie, read good comic books, and spend time eating diner food and cookies with the people that you love. Thanks for watching.